April 18th, 2025 edition. I'd like to make a shout out to Ria for our song today and Nathan for these beautiful slides you will be seeing. So welcome. So happy you're here. So if you would like, we would love to know who is here today by doing some introductions in the chat. If you could share your name, your pronouns, your organization, and then if you'd like, what is your favorite spring blossom? So I will kick it off. My name is Christine Rankin. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. And I would say today my favorite spring blossom would be lilacs because I cut some off of my tree this morning. So that was really lovely to be able to do that. So I'll read a few from the chat. Leslie, hello. You love tulips. Me too. Good morning, Kat. Dogwood flowers. Oh, those are beautiful. Pansies, hyacinth, daisies, giant orange poppies. So many beautiful flowers this time of year. So yes, please keep putting those in the chat. Love to know who is here today. And we can go to the next slide. So for our agenda today, we are going to have some leadership updates as well as fiscal updates. Then we are going to hear from our friends on the OPHI CPO equity funding landscape analysis. And then we are going to have time for community events and for you to share anything that is on your mind. Right. So I will pass the mic over to the fearless Dolly, who will give you some updates.
Hello. Good morning to you all. How's everyone doing today? I don't know which part of the state you're calling in from, but I hope that it is sunny and beautiful. And if it's not, I hope that it clears up for you. Dolly England here, she, her queen. I am the interim equity director now. That's wild. Here I am. Josilia and Leanne are busy today, so I will be giving you your updates. You have activity and expense reports due, y'all. Did you know that? I hope you know that. It is activity and expense report season, and they are due on May 9th. We are very excited to get all of your activity and expense reports because it lets us know all of the amazing work that you're doing in community. So make sure you get those in. You got any problems? I just need you to communicate that with your CEC. Okay? Get it all in. Next update. Well, guess what next week is, y'all? Is everybody ready? Is everybody coming? Next week is our public health conference for CBOs. Y'all, we have been working so hard on this, so hard, tirelessly. Here's what I want to let you know. We got almost 600 people coming. Yeah, that is a lot. Yeah. We got all kinds of amazing workshops and sessions for you to help expand your minds, help you connect with others in your community doing this work, others across the state doing this work. We have some good self-care stuff in here. I don't know. Is Jamila on? Y'all, Jamila, United Way, our friends over at Working Class Acupuncture will be offering acupuncture all day at this event for free. Y'all, we got a photo booth, we got a DJ. Now, if for some
Wow.
reason,
We are going to sing karaoke?
no karaoke, but we got DJ Smokey. I saw you on the dance floor last year, Sandra. We will have a dance party. It'll be excellent. In fact, we built in a full hour into the agenda just for you to network and have a dance party because no good conference is complete without a dance party. So, y'all, come ready to network. Bring your business cards. I want you to know that this event is for you. We want to create opportunities for you to learn and grow. And that is what this is. So I hope you come. If you have anybody that didn't register and wants to come, do not email your CEC. Do not ask, "Oh, is it okay?" blah blah blah. Just bring them. Okay? I don't got time for this anymore. It is too close to the deadline. We ain't doing that no more. You just show up and you bring them, and we'll make them a name badge when they get here, okay? I'm not gonna turn anybody away, but I'm not taking any more emails of, "Oh, can you?" No, I'm done. So, with all of that said, this is the last time I'm gonna say this. If you are coming from out of town, and if you have made a hotel reservation, you likely got a call from me or an email from someone on my team. If this is the case and you know what I'm talking about, can you make an emoji or put something in the chat? If you are coming in from out of town and you booked a hotel room at the DoubleTree and you have not heard from me or my team, can you please put your name in the chat? If you have a hotel room booked at the DoubleTree and you have not been contacted by me or my team, I would like you to please put your name in the chat. If you don't have a room and you need a room, put your name in the chat. And I'm talking about people coming from far. If you're over near Beaverton or oh, I'm in Estacada, I'm sorry, I can't give you a room. But if you are coming from Medford, yes, Rachel. Now, I don't know who's on. We're going to get your names out of the chat and I'm going to follow up with an email. Unless you want to just put your email in and then I can copy paste you and send you an email. What happened was, and this is the last update and I'm going to pass it on. I booked too many hotel rooms and now I have to pay for them all. And I would rather just give them to you. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So if you didn't, yeah, put your email in the chat. You didn't put here for me. Okay. Before we move on, I know people are like, what's happening with the extension? Look, we promised you it's going to happen, but we're working on the conference too. And we got your activity and expense reports, and Zach is busy, and the fiscal team is busy. So give us a little more time. We're working on the details, and we're going to get that to you. Zach, my fiscal dude, you're here. Can you share with CBOs the exciting news about next week? Because they don't know, but I do.
What exciting news.
Where will you be next week, Zach?
I guess I'm going to be at a dance party in Portland.
Whoop,
If
whoop.
the fiscal dude is coming from Alaska to be with you all. So if you've never met Zach, if you've always wanted to ask Zach questions, he will be with us in person. So fiscal dude, I'm super excited about it. You
I'm
got any
very
other fiscal
excited too.
updates? Or did I just say your update?
No, that was pretty much all of it. Thanks, Dolly. I think you covered everything. But thanks for that shout out. I am really looking forward to meeting everybody and being in that space. I think I've said this numerous times, but it is the work that fills up my cup. It is what makes the spreadsheets worthwhile. So I'm really excited about this.
Back to you, Christine.
Thank you so much. So excited to see you, Zach. Probably going to try to stop you from leaving. And now I am super excited. I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Jessica, who would like to introduce our next guest.
Thank you, Christine. Happy Friday, everyone. This is Jessica Beltran, Community Engagement Coordinator, she, her, ella. I'm just here to briefly introduce Oregon Public Health Institute, who has been working on a really cool project. They've been doing some great work around the CBO funding landscape assessment to help us better understand the funding opportunities available for community-based organizations here in Oregon. So that's you all. Their goal is to make sure that OHA's funding connects with other resources out there and ultimately supports the health equity work that we all care about. So they're going to walk us through what they found and their assessment and share what is next. So I will hand it on over to OPHI team. I see a lot of you here, so I'm not sure which of you is going to kick us off.
Thanks, Jessica. This is Emily Hankey. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of Oregon Public Health Institute. And I am here with my collaborator, Arthur Davis, today. Arthur, I don't have you up on my first screen, but I know you're here. There you are. Hey, hey. And we're excited to be here with all of you today. Let me give a little bit more background on OPHI and the project, and then Arthur's going to share some really great nuggets of info that we hope you all find timely and useful in this current moment where we're in. OPHI is a nonprofit organization. We work statewide. We were founded in 1999. Our mission is to improve health, advance equity, and respond to public health needs. That's a pretty broad mission, and it means there are several ways we do what we do. And one of them is as a tobacco grantee, like many of you. We have a project that is all about helping early childhood educators, especially childcare workers in the Portland metro area's Black community, really work on tobacco prevention for themselves and their communities through an understanding of how big tobacco exploits racial trauma. So our gratitude to OHA for allowing us to do this wonderful project with all the wonderful people that we get to engage. Stuff that we do includes research projects that are aligned with our mission, and especially projects that allow us to contribute to systems change for health equity. So today we're going to be sharing with you some of our early insights from one of those projects, which is a landscape scan, like Jessica said, of funding sources available to CBOs in Oregon that align with OHA's grant funding areas and goals. And we started this project many months ago when the funding landscape was vastly different, friends. I know all of you know that. We are standing on shifting sands, is how I would put that. So it's hard to get our arms around what is happening at the federal level, and it's hard to say exactly what that's going to mean in Oregon, but we do know it's going to mean something. And we know that Oregon's funding landscape is going to change. And with that in mind, we have rerouted this project a little bit to keep it relevant and to ensure that actually we're taking advantage of the fact that we're doing this project at honestly exactly the right time now. Not that we want to be in this time, but it's a good time to have information. We just want to make sure that we're going to package it the right way and that the findings we have are going to be relevant for all of our various audiences. So with that in mind, final findings are still forthcoming. However, today we have enough to share with you, and it feels like the time to do so is right now, that y'all need this info right now. And we don't want to sit on it and perfect it and everything when you could use the info right now. So that's what we're going to do. as we all try to work through what comes next for our revenue strategies and how are we going to continue to stay operationally viable so we can continue serving our communities. I am privileged to work on this, as is the whole OPHI team, with Arthur Davis, who is an expert on grant writing and funding strategies in Oregon and works with many, many CBOs across sectors. Today, Arthur is bringing additional context, information, and experience from all of his work, and including on this project. Arthur is a partner of ours on this project, to share with you. And like I said before, just given what's going on, this felt like the right thing to do. I hope that you agree. We'll be inviting discussion as we go. But yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. And Arthur, I'll hand it off to you.
Great. Thank you, Emily. So this presentation is entitled Crisis and Opportunity Grant Readiness Amid Nonprofit Funding Challenges. We have a lot of challenges, and there's a little bit of doom and gloom in this presentation because it's going to get worse. So how can we be prepared and how can we engage is the question for today. And we'll talk about the funding challenges that we face, some of which people haven't been talking about a lot. So there's some that are maybe non-obvious, and what strategies can we take to respond, both as community-based organizations and for the funders. And then what's our general grant readiness that our organizations need to be thinking about, which will also support mission and program readiness. So my trade is grant writing. I've been working as a full-time grant writer for 14, 15 years, work with a variety of local nonprofits, predominantly in social services, workforce, education, and health. I teach grant writing at Portland Community College. I've taught at Central Oregon Community College and other places. I work with about a dozen clients. And so one thing that's really interesting about working as a grant writer with the nonprofits is you get to see kind of the inside scoop, right? And then most recently, we've been working on this OHA funder landscape project. Thank you, Oregon Health Authority. And our team has interviewed a couple of dozen funders and a couple of dozen nonprofits across the state. And I've personally been able to interview about a dozen funders to kind of confidentially so that we can synthesize the information and put it together. So what are our funding challenges this year? You know, one piece is the COVID cliff. And I'm sure you all are aware of this. A lot of money came through during COVID. Oregon Health Authority had a lot of money to distribute during COVID. And one thing that happened during that time is that we had new programs, expansion of programs, new nonprofits, and for once, in many cases, enough money. But that funding's ended. And even though maybe the funding ended a couple of years ago, in many cases, we're seeing that play out for nonprofits now. They're spending down the last of the grant extensions. They're dipping into reserves and facing that funding challenge. At the same time, we have the cuts in federal funding. So we have freezes, we have cuts. Guess what? Even if the funding is nominally there and the staffing has been decimated, grantees may not be able to access their money. And that's happening for nonprofits, I know. We read the headline news about judges putting freezes on it. But in reality, nonprofits are either have been defunded or can't access their funds. And a lot of people in this call, you may say, well, gosh, I don't get federal funding. Maybe this doesn't apply to me. But a lot of us do get pass-through federal funding. And so that means that we have initiatives through all sorts of local, county, and state entities that fund our nonprofit with grants and contracts, and it's federal money. And that federal money is being cut. But even if we're in a position and say, well, I don't even get pass-through funding, something else that's going to happen is that all the entities that did get federal funding are now going to be coming to the same funders looking to help fill the gap. And the reality is that no private philanthropy and not even state money can't fill the gap in federal funding. We're also looking at the stock market is down, and maybe we'll face a recession. And that's important for a couple of reasons. One is individual giving, but also because foundations give out 5% of their corpus, how much money they have, every year. And then they might spend another 1 to 3% to run their foundation. And the rest is reinvested to grow the corpus, their body of funds. And what that means is that when the stock market goes down, in other words, the times of greatest need, the amount of money that the foundations have to distribute goes down. You may remember that happened in the Great Recession. A lot of set foundations stepped up to the plate and said, hey, we're going to withdraw some extra funds. But the scope and scale we're looking at now, particularly if we get into a combination of cuts in federal funding and any type of recession, we're looking at less money. And one final factor is when we get into cuts in Medicaid. So there are organizations like federally qualified health clinics that get Medicaid funding. If that funding is cut, they're going to be looking for makeup funding. And I talked to funders who said, yeah, we haven't traditionally funded FQHCs because they get this federal money, right? But we're now contemplating, do we need to intervene because they'll have less money? So I promised this would have like the bad news, doom and gloom part. It does. So what we're looking at is more nonprofits and more programs were established during the pandemic with the pandemic funds, but now we have less funding, and we expect to continue to see fewer funds coming through from the federal level, right? So we have more competition for fewer dollars. That's our situation today. So what are some strategies? First, the hard ones. One is really looking at focusing our programming and budget. We probably can't do everything that we did during the pandemic, and we're probably going to have to make some hard choices around cost cutting and really mission focus to see what's the important stuff. I spoke with a person who really has a great statewide vantage, and they expect to see quote changes up to and including mergers and acquisitions and program closures. So we may face some hard choices. But there's things we can do to help remediate that and to move our missions forward even during tough times. I would suggest that funder relationships will be even more important than ever. People give to people, they give to organizations they know. So how do we maintain relationships with the funders? I mean, some of it's as simple as we attend the webinar so they see our faces. We get our grant reports in on time so that we're a great partner, right? And then maybe between RFPs, we can get an individual meeting or site visit to talk about our program, where we want to go, and ask for advice from their perspective, right? So to develop those funder relationships, it's not getting an inside preference, but it's about understanding the funder and helping them understand you so that you can work together effectively as partners. Also looking at local and regional funding. So, we have state funding, allocated funding that comes through entities like OHA. So that's non-federal funding, it's state tax dollars. We have programs like in the Portland area, the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which is all local tax dollars and can't be cut. Measure 110 statewide, again, it's local money. And of course, the local foundations. Also looking at partnerships. So partnerships are so important for our nonprofits to be able to do more work together, right? And I think it's going to get even more important. And what we heard from a lot of the funders, frankly, was that partnerships will be even more important. And I'll talk about some strategies there. But working together to solve problems without having to, say, create new programs. And there's also some emergency funds in Oregon from the Federal Readiness and Leverage Fund. This fund was created, so if you're losing federal dollars, significant federal dollars, this is one option to kind of triage that. The fund was created to help BIPOC organizations get ready, prepare to apply for federal grants, and to provide matching funds in the event that they could apply for a federal grant, but it required a match, right? But in response to the current situation, they added a program to provide emergency funding for potentially any nonprofit in Oregon that has had federal funding cuts. And the way it works is, say you had, a $500,000 federal grant, and that grant has been discontinued. Then they might supply, say, 80,000 just to keep a core staffing there so that you can do the minimum that you have to do. They can't replace $500,000 or $1,000,000, but they might be able to keep an FTE or a portion of an FTE in place. Another strategy is to build our fundraising capacity. And I know that it's hard to get the time to do that, but there are resources out there to help us. So the People's Nonprofit Accelerator has 10-week cohorts for fundraising and for grant writing. And they're excellent programs. I used to teach grant writing there myself. Highly recommended. Nonprofit Association of Oregon has professional development. Getting a technical assistance grant. So sometimes funders like Meyer Memorial Trust, Collins Foundation, a slightly different avenue with Portland Clean Energy Fund, they will say, if you have a grant with them, sometimes they'll fund $5, $10, $20, $30,000 to do something like bring in a fundraising consultant to help you build your fundraising plan and then coach you through it, or to do professional development for your board so they can get out there in the community more. So sometimes they do that without a regular formal application process. And I would certainly talk to some of my funders about that. I teach a grant writing class at Portland Community College. I don't get paid per admission, so I don't mind publicizing it here. It's the same rate no matter who signs up. And the link is right there. If you search PCC grant writing, it should come up at or near the top in Google. And then thinking about the budgeting. So budgeting is even more important than ever. And, for especially some of our smaller nonprofits, because of our capacity, sometimes it's been a little bit of a back burner type of thing. But I think now we have to look at how are we going to create a balanced budget for the coming year and to update that. So if the funder sees, and I've seen this happen in real life, if the funder sees that you have $1 million in expenses and $700,000 in budgeted revenue because we lost the COVID funding and the federal funding or the pass-through funding, they're going to say, wow, this isn't a sustainable program. What can you increase and or what are you going to cut? And I think that's really important to take a hard look at right now. Normally, we want to see a 3-month operating reserve, ideally, for our nonprofits. And that's always been a stretch a lot of times, right? We know that. But right now, it may be like, yeah, we can't necessarily do that the way we want to do it. And then make sure that you understand your financials. If you're especially in a smaller nonprofit, Nonprofit Association of Oregon has classes. There's a really great program with Deborah Steinkopf and Anthony Petchel run. And I know people who've been through it. It's the Nonprofit Leadership Academy. It's a cohort of, I think, 4 weeks or something. And it's really designed for board members, executive directors, but you don't need like a degree in accounting or something like this. It'll really help you really get to know and understand your financials, and they'll work with you one-on-one. So getting that in order is going to be so important so we don't get a surprise later. And this happens. I've seen it. Nonprofit, the planning, the cash flow planning, the budgeting isn't there. And then one day they say, oh, we're out of money. Wow, what happened? And that's not where we want to be. We want to make the choices earlier in the process, right? And try to do the fundraising earlier in the process. Also thinking about there are times to say no to funding. Federal applications, for example, have long been challenging because you are operating on a reimbursement model and it can take months and months and months to get reimbursed. And this happens with other grantors as well. And even local and state funders who offer, say, well, we do reimbursement, but you can also get the funding up front. That often is more complex to get the funding up front. So it's more challenging from a management and bookkeeping perspective. But of course, now with the federal money, it's getting even more problematic because we don't know if it'll really be there. one thing you can do to ease the burden in some of these cases to act is to be a recipient. I talked about partnerships, and so to be a subrecipient. So to partner with a larger entity that can handle this stuff. And in the case of federal grants, it might be an educational service district, it might be a university, it might be some other larger entity. In the case of like state and local, it could be one organization leading a consortium and subcontracting out. And then our general grant readiness. Think about things like our board size and composition. Do we have a board that represents the community served and brings expertise? The minimum legal number of board members is 3. But funders take that as kind of a red flag for a couple of reasons. One is do we have community representation to understand what's going on? Do we have the expertise we need in banking and marketing or whatever it is that the board members in our programs that the board members bring? But also from a funder perspective, the question is, well, if community members won't join to support, why should we? With a footnote that sometimes in truly rural areas that can get harder. And I think most of the funders understand that if you're in a truly rural county, then everybody's being recruited for the same boards. And if it's okay, I'll do the Q&A at the end if that works. And if we need to do something sooner, let me know. And that way we can have plenty of time. Making sure your executive director is somebody who can engage with the funders and teeing them up for success, making sure that they're getting the appointments, that you have a plan before the visit, that you've researched the funder, that you know your 3 key points you want to bring into that meeting no matter what, you know how to approach it, and to have an executive director that can do that work, right? Because if you don't, that's harder, but to support the ED in that work. Make sure you're in a good position to tell your story with clients, client stories, photos, videos, your outcomes measurement. Can we measure the objectives that we have for each grant, and can we measure the impact in the community or the outcomes? It's a good time to work on, quote, boilerplate text. So in other words, if we can have like a 5 or 10 page application that we can then cut and paste and modify for other applications, this is a good time to do that. And making sure that you have a strategic direction. So you may have a strategic plan, which is great, and you may be able to get technical assistance for that, but it's a lot of work and time to develop a strategic plan. Can your board agree on your 1, 3, 5 year goals for the organization so that everybody on staff can work towards that, and you can communicate with the funders, here's where we're headed. This is where your investment is going. It's not just to serve the people now, but it's to do this in the future. So those are some pieces that we can take as applicants. So one piece of this project was about what funders can do, and OPHI will have like a more customized and detailed list for OHA that we'll talk to one-to-one to say, hey, Oregon Health Authority, here's what we heard, here's what would help people. But generally speaking, what we heard from both funders and nonprofits lined up remarkably. I mean, it was just almost a direct correlation between what the funders see could be helpful and what the nonprofits see could be helpful. So it should be easy, right? So again, we'll have more details, and these are great to the extent that OHA can implement these responses. It'll be helpful, but again, we'll have more details and specific recommendations later. One is we heard a lot from funders and nonprofits is general operating funds. And the funder said again and again, we know you do good work. We know you're doing the work in the community. You need funding to do what you do. So instead of building and inventing new programs every year for grant application purposes, can we provide general operating funds? Also responsive grants. That means that instead of kind of a top-down approach of we're the funder and we know what the need is in the community and how to respond, the funders say, hey, nonprofits, write us an application. Tell us what the need is and how you will respond because you know the community better than we do. Larger multi-year awards was another one because it takes, as you know, and I think OHA has done that admirably in many cases. because it takes, as you know, so much overhead to apply every year, to report every year, to fill out all this unique paperwork, often for $5,000 or $10,000, right? And to simplify. So how do we simplify the application, which does not always mean the least number of words, right? So sometimes you get like things like a lot of little text boxes, and it takes a lot of work to fill those in. How do you have fewer text boxes and more space to present within there, for example? And reporting. Often simplified reporting can be more impactful. One thing we heard from funders is that so you can offer a report, a site visit, a video options. And one thing we heard from funders was that a lot of times when they meet in person, so to speak, or on Zoom, that those informal meetings, sometimes they end up getting more information than they did from their written reports because people just talk about their program. And then you also build more of a trusting relationship where the nonprofits can share the issues that are going on and talk about potential solutions. And so that's like from the grant making approach, and also ecosystem support. Building our nonprofit and funder ecosystem is something we heard a lot about. So one is supporting collaborations. We talked to funders who brought together nonprofits, for example, in a large rural county, taking one city had a number of service providers, and the foundation brought together a half a dozen of these providers to provide services one day a week in a town that was maybe a couple of hours away. And so without reinventing new programs or adding a huge burden to any one program, they were able to serve another city where the transportation was really a barrier for people. One piece on the collaborations is to be able to fund at a higher level, though. So one thing that happens is that if you just have one flat funding level and it's not sufficient, then 2 or 3 or 4 partners can't work together. You have to have a larger pot of money for the collaborations. Another thing we heard a lot was about supporting conveners. So Nonprofit Association of Oregon, People's Nonprofit Accelerator, Pride Foundation, Women's Foundation of Oregon, Oregon Public Health Institute. These groups are out there working with the nonprofits. And so a lot of times the funders can work with them to help support the nonprofits through technical assistance, through capacity building, through grant distribution. And we saw some of that with like, I think it was Women's Foundation of Oregon, distributed grant funds, and getting it, so be able to push it out to the grassroots nonprofits more effectively. Developing shared resources. This actually came up a lot. It's a big lift. But the idea was, how can we provide, especially for emerging organizations, nonprofits and rural nonprofits, what entity can provide bookkeeping, HR, marketing support? Is there some place to create a one-stop shop? That might involve, I don't know, State of Oregon funding, OHA funding. I don't know how to do that. And it was something that was a remarkably popular concept, but it's granted a big lift. We had a lot of comments about underserved rural Oregon. So how do funders get out into the communities? And what we heard again and again, that is about going to truly underserved rural areas and spending time there in person, like days, not just doing a presentation. So one thing that can happen is we go out and we do a presentation in Bend and say, yeah, we reached Central Oregon. But Bend, Oregon is very different from like Crook County. So how do we get out to the more underserved areas and build those relationships? And then finally, a lot of comments on bringing together government and private philanthropy. So both convening the funders, both from the foundations and from the government, and also potentially getting State of Oregon involved. But how do we bring those together to create support and structure and framework for the nonprofits? Okay, so I promised a lot of bad news, but I also went in with, just to come back to why are we doing this, right? Funding cuts, changes, whatever happens, we're still doing this to help people every day, right? And one thing, the reason I wake up in the morning is I get paid to be a grant writer, right? but I get to work with nonprofits and leadership at nonprofits every single day who are helping people and changing the world. And that's what we're about. So it's just an honor and a thrill to do that. So I wanted to end with that. With that, we have some time, and you all can let us know how much time, some time for questions, comments. And I'm curious, like, what steps are people taking? What strategies are we looking at? What challenges are we facing? A lot of this has not been talked about. Nonprofits are not out there saying, oh, we cut this program, but it's been happening. Or we faced this COVID cut, but they're not talking about it, but it's been happening. So there's some chance for sharing as well. And to think about, well, what support would be helpful? We can keep this process today, right now, of community input moving by saying, yeah, here's if you share, here's the support that we need. So love to open it up. Emily might jump in. Emily from Oregon Public Health Institute might jump in to help facilitate as well. And thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and this opportunity.
Arthur, we do have a question in the chat. Can you give us a high-level overview to respond to Carrie's question? What are donor-advised funds, and how does that fit into the mix of accessing funding?
Yeah, good. That's a great question. So there's been a move away from traditional giving and traditional donations to foundation to donor-advised funds, where people with money can park their money tax-free into an account with the idea of distributing it to nonprofits. There's a big difference, though, between a traditional foundation and a donor-advised fund, because the foundation has to distribute 5% of their funds out to the community every year. The donor-advised funds don't have that requirement. They can keep it in there for decades if they want to, and they often do. Another big difference is that the donor-advised funds don't have to do the transparent federal tax reporting that the foundations do. So with foundations, you can go to GuideStar or ProPublica or Foundation Directory online, and you can see their history of giving. With the donor-advised funds, you can't. So the donor-advised funds at entities, they put their money into like Oregon Community Foundation or Community Foundation of Southwest Washington, or OCF does an excellent job. But the reality is that the financial advisors work with them, and that's who you would nominally talk to. But they don't necessarily want to get a lot of outreach and new friends, so to speak. So it means that more money is tied up in less accessible locations. One step I take is when we do, for example, with Oregon Community Foundation, often when you apply, or sometimes even when you don't apply, you'll get a award from family funds or donor advised funds. And so my best practice, and I've heard this, I've talked to several staff at OCF about this, is we'll send out a 2-page letter every year from the executive director to that fund with an update on what we did this year, even if they didn't give this year, maybe they gave in a prior year. And what I've heard is that's enough contact, but that's like the right level of contact. So you can at least nurture it that way. If you're lucky, you'll be able to get to know the people who administer the funds. Does that answer the question? Hopefully. Sophia has her hand raised. And you're muted.
Sorry. I did have a question about that training that you had mentioned for directors and board members. If
Yeah.
I could get that information maybe in the chat, that would be very helpful.
Yes, let me find that while we talk. It's the Nonprofit Financial Leadership Academy, and I'll put it in the chat, npfla.com. Thank you. All right. Anything else? Or Emily, do you have any prompts?
One of the things that you said, and I don't think anybody here is surprised to see that, there is recognition on the funder side and there is, need for general operating support on the grantee side. And one of the things you said is when funders who can give general operating support do so, they say, we know you, we like what you do, here's general operating support. In your experience, I guess I have 2 questions. How long does it take to build a relationship with a funder? to get to the point where they're down to give some operating support to your organization? And how do you do that? Build that relationship?
Yeah, fortunately, a lot of the funders, the big funders, especially now, Marie Lamfrom Foundation, Mar Memorial Trust, Collins, are moving towards, in many cases, general operating funds. So that makes it a lot easier. And in fact, I've gone to Lamfrom in the last year with a program plan, and actually to Lamfrom and Meyer in the last year, and said, hey, we have this program. And they said, yeah, let's make it general operating funds. So the good news is that that's where the funders are moving. I do think it's important to always build out your goals, your objectives, your strategic outcomes and strategic direction. So you still want to build that out. You still want to say, here's the exciting program that we're going to do this year, and here's how it's going to impact people. And then the funding mechanism is general operating, so you can spend it on anything. So if for anybody on the call that's not familiar, general operating means that you can spend it on any expense. You can pay your bookkeeper, you can pay your grant writer. Normally in the traditional program-oriented grant funds, you couldn't do that. But yeah, I think a lot of the funders, most of the funders, they will say if they fund general operating, and more of the funders are understanding that, hey, there's a need there. So it's less, we don't have to do quite the same level of quote traditional relationship building maybe that we would have had to have done in the past. Because in the past, we kind of wanted to avoid asking for general operating funds. It was always stronger to apply for program funds, almost always. And that's been changing, happily enough. Mercy. And you're muted.
Anyway, thank you for taking my
Yeah.
wave. Gosh, like I said in a chat, it says that this is a very important information that you share. You also went ahead and asked a very big question. What help do you need? What help do you need? And that is a very general question.
Yeah.
And like Emily just said, like we build this relationship. She said, how do you? So my organization is really young and it's been thriving because of this relationship. And some of these organizations believe that they trust my work now, they can just give me the money when I apply for it. So like OCF and other little foundations, they always give us that money. However, if you say, what help do you need? I'm coming back to you. What help will you have for a small organization like mine that really step up because of the COVID and the trust that Dolly put in us that made other people to start looking at us? But I love this work and I really want to move forward. So what help can you provide? You talk about partnership. Can I partner with you for you to guide me to build this organization? Yeah. That's my question. What help can you provide for me? Because I really need it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that came up a lot with our funder interviews. So how do we help build capacity and provide technical assistance? How do the funders help build capacity and provide technical assistance for the organization? So how do we build our board leadership? How do we build our financial systems? How do we increase our fundraising capacity? How do we support executive leadership to grow professionally? And it's kind of interesting because the take was that it's still, for the funders, it's still an emerging field and it's still experimental. So they've tried a number of approaches, bringing in consultants to help, like funding. I think in the case of fundraising in particular, a fundraising consultant can be helpful for like individual and corporate giving. But they've worked with funding consultants for organizational development, fundraising, grant writing, et cetera. They've funded cohorts, like peer educational cohorts with information sessions at each one, kind of like what we're doing right now, but more intensely focused and paying the nonprofits to participate. A theme that came up a lot was that nonprofits can't necessarily afford to take time off to do professional development. But if you put a small cohort together and have meaningful payment, then it works into the budget and the program plan. There were other approaches, which I'm blanking on them right now. Also something that came up a lot was the idea of doing executive loans, like from a large nonprofit to support a small nonprofit for 6 months or a year, for like a year, or to serve on a board for a year. So those are things that funders could facilitate. And those were the approaches that got identified to at least experiment with. And I see Dolly has her hand up.
Hi, I do want to chime in, and here's what I want to say without saying a lot. I too have been having conversations with funders, and I have had very similar things that I've said. CBOs need infrastructure support. They need more professional development support. Things like auditors and bookkeepers and access to these things that would help strengthen their organization. The two things that came up, Arthur, that you said that this funder said to me just yesterday was we are interested in looking at a loan type program for CBOs to fill gaps. Like when grants don't start until later and you need to fill the money, like, I don't know, maybe what we're planning to do between January and March of 2026 with our own grant, just throwing it out there. They also were interested in the idea of capacity building awards that could be used, as you said, at the discretion of the organization. And I was very clear about our barriers as the state. We got a lot of rigmarole and a lot of bureaucracy. And if you funders can eliminate that, it would be huge for CBOs. So I'm going to say that out loud. And then, Arthur, the last thing I'm going to say is if y'all are coming next week on the 23rd, I've invited a lot of people. Can you read between the lines? There's going to be a lot of people there, a lot of important people, probably some rich people. So y'all should just do what you do and uplift your communities and let them see it because they will be there. Okay, Arthur, go back.
Oh, that's great. I was wondering, yeah, and I think that might be our note to end on. Dolly's representing with OHA. I think we're getting close to time. I don't think we have any pending questions. I think that might be the place we end if that works for you all. Yeah, thanks so much. This has been, I will say, being able to talk to funders confidentially and being able to wrap up and get their input has been a lot of fun and really useful, really unique, really unique opportunity. And thank you to OHA. Thank you.
Arthur, can we invite you back? Emily,
Well, absolutely.
can we
I'd
have
love
you
to work
come
together.
back?
100%.
Yes, please.
Emily and Arthur, you rock. We're going to ask you to come back.
Thank you.
Christine, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Arthur and Emily. That was a really helpful presentation and much appreciation. I see we're almost at time. It looks like we only have about 3 minutes left. I don't know if anybody wants to say some final comments or thoughts. We do have quite a few community events in the slides. I think we can email those out. I think that might be the best time, best idea considering we're almost at time. So when you get the follow-up email, please take a look and just see the events and announcements that are in there. And I think we can stop sharing and wrap up for today if that sounds good with everyone.
I can't wait to see you all next week in person.
Same.
Me too. Me too. I love it.
Me
Wow.
too. I'm so excited.
Kylo, you have to come. We miss you in Ashland.
Oh, I know I missed you. I did get to meet Aaron and Ashlyn though.
I
Sorry to
know.
sorry to jump on here, Dolly, like that, but
Well,
yay! So excited. Aaron showed up at the powwow. It was so neat. I got to explain to her like all the different dance categories and what was going on. It was super cool. Anyway, thank you for all this information today.
Always, everything we do is for you all. We'll see you next week.
So appreciate you. Yes, yay.
gracias. Thank you.
See
Have
you
a good
next
weekend.
week. Bye,
Enjoy
everyone.
sun shining. Enjoy.